so that we all get a bite of the cherry.
Okay, who's going first then, Andrea?
Which is the first one?
Sorry, Treble 23.
Okay.
Westbrook Farm.
Andrew.
That'll be me. I'll take that then, Andrea. Okay, so planning application 0023 Westbrook Farm, Harp Road. It's the change. I think this has been before us before. It's the change from pasture land to a caravan park extension, static vans and timber chalets. Before I go, are there any comments or views from any of the members before I get into my comments? None? No.
There may be some after you've made your comments, Andy. So
I have no doubt. Andrea warned me with a good luck symbol.
Yeah.
Okay. There are three areas that this application was rejected on last time. It was considered to be not appropriate for the size and role and the nature of the location. And this was saying that it was basically doubling of the size. Section 2, doubling of the size, also made it prominent within the countryside and visible, and deterred from the natural landscape and flat nature, and would have a significant impact on its character, referring to our landscape. And it made particular interest to the fact that it's permanent structures that are being cited, and use the phrase of unacceptable sizing. The third rejection point was that there was insufficient information for dealing with foul and surface water and drainage, and did not demonstrate, in the words of the report, as safe from flood risk. So with taking those three rejections, we've gone through the documentation. I think first comment I would say when reading through the documentation is that some of the documents refer to 56 static vans and 12 buildings. Other documents refer to 56 and 10 timber buildings. And the final application refers to 47 and 9. So there is confusion in the documentation there. I believe we're dealing with 47 and 9. But if we look at the original documentation, 56, 12, 56, 10, down to 47, 9, that doesn't seem a significant reduction in the comments made that I highlighted earlier. And it then if you look at the planning looks quite heavy, quite dense, and phrases like overdeveloped could be used. Comments came from the impact of footpaths and bridleways. The view from the knoll was particularly picked up, and an example was given that other caravan sites further away have been allowed, but it does mention that this one is closer. And part of the defence of that is the planting of trees. Well, I took a special walk up the knoll to look, and trees are become irrelevant when you're at that height because you look down on them. So I think that is not sufficient to cover one of the concerns. There's also confusion on the amount or on the size of the estate in the documentation. The opening application says it's 1.5 hectares. The transport assessment states that it's 3.2 hectares. Looking at the documentation, looking at the plan, I would suggest it's larger than 1.5. Going through and continuing on the theme of size, the transport assessment came back and said that there was a 30% increase on Harp Road, and this was not detrimental, and it was a limited impact on the A38 because of the volume of the traffic, and again, not detrimental. However, what I would question, speaking to individuals and looking at the road, is that Harp Road is a narrow, windy and interesting road, and an increase of industrial traffic, which would obviously come with this, could be an issue for us. And also that junction with the A38 is not the easiest of junctions either. So I would question whether that is actually in keeping with the concerns of increased traffic. And then when you read through the documentation, there is a contradiction. The site is preparing to have 84 cycle parks and encourage cycling as part of the inventory of the site, along with fishing. And And if you put more cyclists down Harp Road with 30% more traffic in narrow and interesting corners, are we not therefore increasing the risk of harm to civilians and to people within the area? Further, going on to the flood assessment, it suggests that the flood and safety is on high ground, and the high ground is from the new club that's being built and the motorway boundary. So there's 56 units. If we say 2 people per unit at the least, that's 112. I don't believe that there is sufficient proof in the documentation that there is enough safety for individuals should such a case arrive. And therefore, the facility, it might not be classified as safe in case of flood risk. There is also much store in the new lake taking on the surface water management and the runoff through the development of the site, which at the moment is a grade 3A, and the ground that it is an actual soakaway, natural soakaway, and they're now making a lot of play on the fact that they'll have a lake there. The question that I would ask when reading documentation, there is no evidential information saying that the lake will cope with the additional runoff, having tarmacked and built and structured across the whole of the site. And again, we don't know whether that's 1.5 acres or 3.2 acres. There is also, on the ecology side, there's a biodiversity report holding objection on the removing of the 2 ponds, and they want a preliminary ecological survey is required, and that has not yet been fulfilled from the documents that I can see. I think the rejections last time were aimed at the empathy and the sympathy of the land of the lowlands that we live in Somerset, and the attraction that it has to bringing in visitors and supporting our tourist industry. And I think that this application has missed that subtlety in the objections. And as such, from my comments, I believe that under the current situation, that we should think about not supporting this application.
Thanks, Andy. That's very comprehensive. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments regarding Andy's report on that planning application? John?
Well done, Andrew. I think that's an extremely good report. I think in every aspect it's a gross exaggeration, this development. No, certainly would not support it in more or less every way.
Andrea?
Again, I'd like to say thank you, Andy. Wow, I thought I gave you the easiest one. That's amazing, and it has come up several times, and we've dealt with it. You know, the older councillors that have been on the planning, we've seen this several times, and there is always this mismatch of information which becomes quite muddy, I think. And you know, we're trying to preserve our countryside, but we're also trying to support local businesses, and they don't seem to have got that in its right proportion. So I think that, yes, you know, your suggestion that we move forward with not supporting this or objecting to it is the right way to go.
Okay. Can we clarify what those objections are? It seems to be we're objecting to it in terms of the ecology report has said they wish to place a holding objection on it, so that a preliminary ecological appraisal is carried out. I think that's one difference. I think we're also objecting to it on the basis that there are inadequate flooding measures for safety. They can't all, if you remember, there's a games room there, and in the last planning application, they were all going to go on the first floor of the games room in the event of flooding. Well, as Andy points out, if you've got another 100 and odd people squeezed into there, it's not particularly good. And I think the other thing that Andy points out is that notwithstanding they had 56 static units and 12 lodges, just to drop it down to 47 units with 9 lodges is still an overdevelopment. And they are packed into that site around a huge man-made lake, which they purport to be suitable for fishing. So I think those are probably reasons. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to that. Andrea?
I would say traffic generation.
I'm sorry. Yeah, quite right. Yeah, thank you.
Just one more. They're trying to say that the planting of trees will improve the environmental impact, and that's not sufficient.
Okay, so have you got all those, Owen, in terms of
They're all
points?
down.
Okay, those are our objections then. Are we all in favour? Can you signify one way or the other? All those in favour first. All those in favour of not supporting the... Yes, sorry, I've worded that badly. All in favour of not supporting this development. That's unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Sandria. Right, 0024, Hafford Wick Lane.
Okay, that's me. So this is Mr. and Mrs. Adams, who Mr. Adams gave us the presentation at the beginning. It's for an erection of an agricultural building to support a small holding. The site area for the building would be 975 square metres, and the actual property is held on 12,000 square metres. There's been some replies from Coastal and Land Drainage. There's no comment. From Network Rail, there's no objection. And from Southwest Heritage, there's no objection. Now, I don't know how much Owen shared, but definitely within the planning team, we had sight of emails and transcripts from local people. There was, Owen actually gave advice to say that if anybody wants to make any remarks or to support or to object or just to have their feelings noted, they should be actually put on the Sedgemoor Planning portal. There is only 2, and that was up till 4 o'clock today. One is to support and one is to object. So the idea is that this small holding would like to become more or self-supporting for their young family, and to actually have their own vegetable plot and to have their own animals and livestock. The proposal was that there is no agricultural storage facility on this property, and the applicant currently has chickens and 10 sheep, but wants to increase their livestock and their grass keep. The design and access, it is a green metal box style profile, which is sheet cladding, which is commonly used in the same area for exactly the same purpose. The existing field access points will be access to the proposed agricultural unit, so there will be no change there. The flood risk, it is within a flood zone, as we all know. However, it is going to be an agricultural building, so therefore suitable footings would have to be put in, or they would have to level the land with drainage. We have a map to show where it's going to be. So it is at the back of the property. However, it is adjacent to cottage pear tree. And then this is the design, which is the metal clad green box. So it has 3 doors at the front and a side door, and then it's plain at the back. Okay, so moving on to the transcript between the clerk and the owner and some interested parties. I thought I would just briefly discuss this. The concern from one of the neighbours is that the building is 60 foot by 30 foot, but it's 20 foot high, and that's where the concern is. The person in question says it's higher than the house, than their own house, and it is directly opposite the proposed development. They believe it's unacceptable and it will be obtrusive and an overdevelopment of the property. It's described as an agricultural building for feed storage and storage of related machinery. But the size is disproportionately large for a small holding of under 3 acres. This person didn't want to put in a formal objection until they had a chance for the neighbour to respond. But if we do not hear from him by early next week and the applicant's application still stands, they will submit a formal objection. The previous owners of this building, of this property, told the neighbour that the new owners had indicated their intention to move their electronic gate business to the property. The design of the proposed building is more in keeping with an industrial unit than for keeping stock. So again, Owen was able to interject and make the suggestion. We then had notes from the owner, Mr. Adams, sorry, I couldn't see it. And he's actually made the presentation. And again, that was from Owen's suggestion, you know, to use that 3 minutes to put yourself forward. The final thing to say about that is that they want to become self-sufficient, and we're all for that. And he wants to secure a weatherproof agricultural building to store hay, straw, animal food and welfare, essential farming equipment, trailers and ground maintenance. The support was from a neighbour, and he would like to register that it's wonderful that a young family have recently moved to the area and would like to make the best possible use of this space. Though the objection is from a person in the area, there is, of course, no opposition to anyone wishing to live the good life as a sustainable life choice, but it should be noted the proposed building is disproportionately large by reference to the very modest landholding. Indeed, the application includes the large garden as part of the total area of land stated in square meterage. The building is proposed is substantial and of permanent structure. They then go to quote policy C01, which is from Sedgemoor District Planning. New development must demonstrate that there are specific countryside needs, such as those of local agricultural industry and local food producers, enhancement of the environment, or where a countryside location is essential or more sustainable. The owners since May have run AJ Electric and Automation Limited. It is advertised on the main gate of the property and extensively on the internet, and classing it as Unit 1 of the address in Wick Lane. There is only one employee that comes and goes at present. It also goes on then to actually state that it's reasonable to suggest that this large holding and entrance from the lane has little to do with a few hens. There are no sheep, as stated in the application, and there is no grass keep available to the close vicinity. To expand livestock numbers is unlikely and impossible without more ground. The assumption must be that the proposed building is for storage and possible the manufacturing of gates. The visual amenity is relatively remote. Rural location is poor. The size and height of the building provides poor visual amenity for the relatively remote rural location, and the size of the building again is disproportionate. The proposed building has no ventilation for livestock and or for hay and storage. How much agricultural machinery could be justified for holding in this size building is what the comment has been made. The interest is only in the matter centred upon the preservation of the attractiveness of the rural lane and the area that this person lives in. That was quite a substantial response, and I felt it was important to actually share the views from the neighbour and also the support from another neighbour. So now, I'd like to open it up to the councillors to ask them for their views, please.
I'll just kick off, and then I'm sure somebody else has got to. But some of the things that are stated there are, if you like, alluding to things that may happen, and we can't judge it on that basis. We have to judge it purely on strict planning criteria, and the strict planning criteria that would seem to apply is that this building is too large for the intended purpose of what has been stated in terms of chicken, grass keep, for storage of agricultural machinery and stores, etc. And that's the thing that seems to come out of this, is that it is not in keeping, and overdevelopment, for want, or oversizing, or overdevelopment, how you want to interpret it. That's my sixpenneth, for want of a better word. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that. John?
Nothing more than that. I would agree with you.
Okay. Brian, did you want to add?
I would agree with you, but particularly about the height, the nearest to the neighbours.
Okay. Cynthia, I can't see you, but anything you want to add?
Well, I think I agree with what has been said. It is obviously a very large building, and
Okay.
Obviously is not going to fit in with really where it is.
Okay. Malcolm, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I think it's a bit over-ambitious for the size of the site available.
Thank you. Andrea, with those comments, what is your recommendation to us?
Okay, so I wanted to share what's actually been put on the portal. I'd like to suggest that there could be a loss of light or overshadowing to the neighbour and their property. The visual amenity, that seems to be compromised. The noise and disturbance resulting from use, that could be a suggested topic of discussion. The layout and the density of the building, as we've all heard, that it's very large for the proposed use. And then again, the design, appearance and materials, although the design and the appearance, the design and the materials are in keeping with an agricultural building, it's the appearance would be that it's very, very large.
Okay, thank you. Andrew.
Did I pick up in some of the comments as well, not being particularly countrified yet, that the building was not fit for purpose for storage of hay and livestock because of ventilation?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Okay, those sound to be our reasons for making this decision. Have you got those, Owen?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so your proposal, Andrea, is that we refuse it based on those grounds?
Yes, please.
Okay, so our proposal is, sorry? Our proposal is then that we refuse this application based on those grounds that we've just identified. All those in favour of that proposal?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Yes? And Malcolm? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Andrea. Okay, 00125 Dubonny Farm. Who's doing that?
That will be me, Mr. Chairman. It's actually 00025. I had trouble trying to find 125 on the portal.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what it
okay,
says.
no problems. Yeah, that's what I found as well. Okay, so this is a and thank you to Mark for giving his 3 minutes earlier during the start of the call to give some explanation. He seems to have covered it off fairly well. So this is a proposed development to infill an existing ponds, create a new access and construct a new parking area, and to install 4 new lodges for accommodation. And as said before, this is at the Dubonny Farm, Wick Road, Lymsham. So there's several documents that are on the portal, on the planning portal. I will stress now that there were no documents on there from any observations of any neighbours or any official, I would say, waterways, etc., that gave any objections or any statements. But the reports that we do have is a tree survey and an arboratory cultural impact assessment. It states in the report that there are no protected or heritage trees either on or immediately adjacent to the site, and the infill and construction activity would not adversely impact upon any retained trees if the specified precautions to be detailed within the arboratory cultural method statement on the tree protection plan are followed. So clearly there are some trees that would be removed, but it doesn't bring any significant issues from the reports. The next document is a sustainability statement, which I found very, very good. It talks about the construction of the 4 units and that these would be constructed at the factory and then transported by roads to be installed on the site. It talks about the materials and the fabrics for constructing these 4 units and that they exceed the building regulation requirements. It also talks about the water and the use of the water on the site. The next report is a very detailed planning statement from a company, RTPI Chartered Town Planners, which goes into real detail with diagrams, over maps of the site, and also sort of like descriptions and diagrams of the 4 units. There is a transport technical report which talks about the proposed car park. So obviously the plan is to infill the ponds and then construct a car park. That would accommodate 68 standard car spaces. And in addition, 2 spaces would be provided for people with disabilities, and a minimum of 5 spaces would be available for taxis. The parking area would also accommodate a coach drop-off collection point. Then there is a report on the flood risk assessment. Bear with me a second. There's so many reports here. Here we go. And the summary of that is that the development site has been fully appraised in accordance with the guidance provided for assessing flood risk under the National Planning Policy Framework. And it's been concluded that overall flood risk is deemed to be low and the development proposals are appropriate. And then, of course, we then have the ecological assessment, and a summary of that is how this was done was a baseline data was obtained through a walk over survey, so actually being on site, and then a desk-based assessment. And the study site is considered to be low ecological value, that value only to be attributed to a small amount of common reed inhabitant with the pond area, and currently no further surveys are considered to be required to characterize the site. So hopefully I've sort of like explained there the reports that are on the portal. As I said, there's no other documents on that portal from any objections from any neighbours or any other official documents. So at this stage, I'll just hand it over to the council here to sort of like ask questions or make any comments.
Yeah, can I ask one question?
Sure.
Infilling of the pond, everybody's happy with that, are they? With the infilling of the pond? The survey and all the documents are happy
Yes,
with the.
there was no objections on any of the documents with regards to the infilling of the ponds.
Okay, thank you. Any other points anybody wants to make? John, Andrew, Andrea, Warwick, Brian, Cynthia?
Doctor.
No, I was thinking about the ponds. Are these really old ponds, or are these ponds that have been there recently made, or because usually they are there for a reason, aren't they? To catch water, etc., etc. But I don't know.
It's one pond, Cynthia. It's not multiple ponds. It's one ponds.
One. And is it a very old established pond? Because when you start clearing them out.
No, it's not. And
Right.
on the what's the report called? The ecological assessment. It talks about the inhabitants of that pond, which
Yes, exactly.
is minimal.
Oh, that's right. That's what I was wondering. Okay, thank you.
Malcolm,
No,
anything?
nothing.
Okay. What's your proposal then?
My proposal here, Mr. Chairman, is that we support this application on the grounds of economic development in the community.
Okay, that's our proposal. All those in favour of that proposal?
Yes.
Yes.
And Cynthia, yes. And
Yep.
you, Nigel? Yeah, that's unanimous then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Very much appreciated.
Okay, let's move on. Item 5. Can you let Bob back in, please, Owen? He's there. Okay.
Back in, yeah.
Footpath matters. Who's
Well,
reporting on footpaths?
Well, I do. I am on the. I'm one of the footpath people. I did read Peter Osborne's email saying that there's a tree that's fallen up along. I think it's behind where he lives, up on the top there, behind the cider farm. Apparently, there's a tree that has fallen down. I haven't seen it because I haven't been around that way for a week or two, which obviously he feels needs to be removed. Did you not see the email? It came through tonight, I think.
No.
No.
Not seen.
No, it came. There was a last one on my iPad. I think it's.
Can we just
yeah.
where you mean, Cynthia, please?
Well,
is it on the path that runs across the top of Peter Osborne's property?
Well, he said it's behind the cider farm, so he did put actually a code number in, but I can't remember it because it's obviously taken it off his map, but it must be up that way or it's along that path. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure where it is, but it's up there, and he said it's fallen down and it needs moving. So I'll have to go around and have a look at it.
It's public land, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it must be over the footpath, otherwise he wouldn't have said.
Okay.
But also, obviously there's an awful lot of mud everywhere. And I went up the knoll the other day and saw that people were walking down, obviously the field, because it is so slippery the other way. But I don't know what the farmer thinks of that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just pointing that out because obviously they're going to do that because it's very slippery going up there.
Well, I don't think Mike Diamond's in any
no, not
state to do anything about it.
No.
But Brian and I did agree to look at it, and they have damaged Mike's fence.
Yeah, they have. They have the top.
And cut across the field to go to the top. Our own handrail has been broken in 2 places, and we also need a new post, but we can't do anything at the moment. The conditions are awful. I think we've got to leave it, just let it go for the moment and address it when the weather gets better. And hopefully the path has been really heavily used right behind the church all the way to the knoll. It's very heavily used. So I think there's little we can do at the moment.
No,
Brian.
no, but it's just a point.
I discussed this briefly with Colin a little while ago. Years ago, of course, people used to walk up across the field because there wasn't a path. Now there is a path. Hundreds of people use the same, and it's going to be the same every year. And I'm not sure what the solution is, because we'll be doing this every year, I think, especially if it's a wet year.
Well, I think that Mike Diamond's fence has to be a bit more robust in terms of making it more.
I was thinking of the steps, really, of but that would cost us a lot of money, wouldn't it?
Well, that's going back in time, isn't it? Because we removed them all.
Yeah, I know.
On the recommendation of some county council.
Well, it's not very satisfactory now, is it, really? But it'll happen again next year, I think.
Yeah. I don't think we can do much so while it's wet.
No.
I think we've just got to leave it until we can get up there and have a closer look at how we can improve it. There's one very muddy area which really we could do with some stone put down to give it a more firmer base. But I don't think there's much we can do at the moment. So Owen, can we just keep bringing that one forward, please?
Move that one forward, yeah.
Path behind the cider farm we've got to have a look at.
Yeah. Also, just another point which we've discussed before, the going across the horse field, where there's that very narrow path which is fenced either side, and really it's almost impossible to walk through there now. And we were going to do something, weren't we, about filling it in? You know what I mean? You go through the, it's the one where it's fenced either side.
Yeah, if you remember,
we were going to do something, weren't we?
Yeah, if you remember, we had issued a contract to Jason, who was going to employ a local person. The stone has been sourced, the equipment has been sourced, but we ran out of time before the weather turned. So we've got the same problem that we had last winter, but at least we've got the landowner's approval now to do it when the weather gets better. So again, we can't do anything now.
No, I know. I just bring it up because it is something we need to do for next winter.
Well, it is in the programme to do. Yeah, we've got the money to do it. It's timetable to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Bob.
Yeah, Colin, I think it may be a similar one in that I've had a couple of people contact me about a stile that's near the railway crossing where the ground has worn away so much from it that for shorter people, they're finding it very difficult to manage. But I think it may be the area that is the other area that we were going to get stoned when we have that other one done. So I'll double check on it, but I think it is the area near the Wingates field, which was, I think, the other area we were getting stoned.
It was. We were going to stone South Wingates Gate. We were going to stone the one as you come back to towards the knoll, the next gate, and then we were going to stone the horse field. All three places were programmed to be done, but we missed out on the weather, unfortunately. Yeah, so it is in the programme. And perhaps, Owen, you could just keep it alive for us so we can it with Jason, please.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on footpaths? But yeah, they are muddy. They are being well used because there's so many people out walking. Okay, highways.
Nothing to report other than at the top of the village, one of the posts round the gas meter is still broken and lying flat.
I can tell you there that we've got Dave Welland, who did some work on there some time ago, is going to give us a quote for all the posts that have been damaged at that end of the village, because there are, I think, Bob, I'm right in thinking there's a few there, aren't there, that have been damaged.
Yes.
And Dave is going to go and have a look in the next few days and give us a price.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Just to follow up on that, the discussions that Owen and myself have had with Wessex, not Wessex,
Wales and West.
Wales and West, thank you very much. What they've said is that they're not taking responsibility for the damage, but as a goodwill gesture to the village, because the village has put up with such a long time of the roads being dug up, they will, as long as the quote is not unreasonable, they will pay for the post to be redone, or they may even do it themselves if they thought the post it was too big a quote. So hopefully it should be at no cost to the taxpayer if we get it done that way.
Marvellous, thank you, Bob. Anything else on highways? Yes, Brian?
Just one little thing. I don't think we can do anything about it, but up the side of Balcox Hall, the road is really split very badly over quite a long length, and it just needs to be kept a watch on, I think.
That has been
a great big fissure in the road.
Yeah, it's been brought up.
I did report this a while ago, and
it has been reported, actually. It's on my reported list.
Right.
So I haven't heard as to what their plans are.
It'll also come up later when we talk about item 6H. It'll come up then as well. Yeah. Thank you. Village Green, it was me this month. All the equipment was functioning okay. In fact, people were or have been using the play equipment and the play area and the Village Green area even during this lockdown, so which is good. The grass was okay, and the bin was emptied and clear of any rubbish. The benches do need refurbishment, and some repairs are required to the benches as well. So when the weather gets better, perhaps we could get someone in to give them a rub down and a refurbish. Just as a matter of interest in that, I have put an application in to the Nuttall Trust to buy one of these special benches again, which don't require any maintenance and are, if you like, maintenance free. So hopefully we might get another one of those to put on the green. The toilets were okay. Both toilets, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that they were so tidy and clean. The male toilet cubicle lock is broken and needs replacing. That's the male toilet cubicle lock, Owen.
Okay.
Other than that,
can I just ask you a question on that? Because I had reported from Sedgemoor yesterday that the bulbs are out in both the ladies and the gents.
Well, when I went down there was no lighting on, so I couldn't.
Yeah, apparently the lighting there's some bulbs need replacing. Now, I'm not quite sure what the council want to do about these what are called tiny little jobs, because I'm not sure we can really justify getting our electrician in to change bulbs. But on the other hand, it's not really the job of the council to do it either. So how do you want to play this? Because they clearly need doing, they need changing.
Yeah, I think, funny enough, Owen, my own feeling, and I'll put it to the councillors later, but if you look at 6H, which Tony Hill brought up, I think it's time we had a local guy that we can just call on to do odd jobs. And one of them would be this, the other one would be cleaning a road sign. If you look at some of our road signs, they're covered with green and mold, and they need just a quick wipe down. I think that would make all the difference. Those sort of jobs, and there are people about, and I think we need to save those little jobs for that sort of person. But perhaps again we could bank that particular item and have a discussion later on. but I don't know if anyone else has got any ideas how we could approach those items. Any ideas? No.
One suggestion could possibly be, I know Burnham Town Council have got a chappie who does these sort of jobs. Now, whether he might be prepared to extend it to Brent Knoll, it's possible. He's somebody they call on regularly for doing these little jobs. He might be somebody who's looking to build up a bit of a portfolio. I don't know. I can find out, certainly.
Yes, please, Owen. I think it's worthy of an investigation. Yeah, please. Other than that, the car park was clear, and for this time of the year, it was in as good a state as one could wish for. Play area report.
Just one thing, is Cynthia, are you okay for the January check? Green check?
Sorry.
Are you okay for the January check?
Oh, what, for the green?
Yes.
Yes, that's okay.
That's okay. Good. Okay. Sorry, Colin.
No, that's okay. Play area report, Owen.
Yeah, that was circulated just before Christmas, actually. So if anybody has any comments on that to make, there was nothing new on it as far as I could see that we didn't already know.
Thank you. Chairman's report. I've no matters to raise. I think it's all being dealt with within our meeting, really. Clerk's report.
Two items. First of all, today I've tried to make the first stages of reinstating our Helping Hands group, because as you know, we helped quite a lot of people back in April during the lockdown, and I've written to all the volunteers asking them whether they're still prepared to do the work if we call on them, and I've had quite a lot of responses to say yes, we are. So there are people now shielding again and who may need the services of Helping Hands. So my intention is to ask Bella and Roger if they could put my little flyer on the notice boards in Brent Knoll, and perhaps we can put something in the next edition of Brent Knoll News, if I write something up for that, and I'll put it on the website. So just so that's one thing. And the other thing is, you all received my interim health and safety report. It's a policy statement. It's not a full-blown report, but in doing my SILCA, I suddenly became aware of the fact that we were legally bound to have one, and we haven't. So what I've done an interim one until Nigel and I can meet up with Atlas in Wellington to decide the more intricate nature of health and safety on the green. So that one just serves a purpose. Do you have any comments on that, Nigel? I mean, were you happy with?
I mean, look, it covers off the fundamentals. Sorry, the basics. It gets us through till we meet up with Atlas.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay, good.
Thank you, Owen. Thanks, Nigel. Police data, is there anything come through at all?
Again, there was a report which I sent through just before Christmas. I don't think there was anything significant on it. I didn't detect anything on it that needed any particular attention being paid to it. So the answer is no, really.
Okay, thank you. Bob, district and county.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of things, really. Normal update on where we are with COVID. Obviously, as you know, we're all now in this lockdown again. Part of the reason is that Somerset, as you know, jumped from a tier 2 to a pretty much straight to a tier 4 with a very quick stop in 3. Basically, the numbers per 100,000, the sort of cases that it's judged on, in Somerset as a whole, we're still in the mid 250s. Sedgemoor is significantly higher than that. We're about 330 plus. And in our particular area, we're some of the worst areas in both, in that the sort of Brent Knoll Barrow area, which covers in effect from Burnham up to Axe Vale, we're showing sort of mid 400s towards 500, and Axbridge itself is over 600. So in our particular neck of the woods, there is quite a high occurrence of the coronavirus at the moment. So it is very much a question of people having to be careful. And there are a number of cases in neighbouring villages that we've become aware of that have been resulted in fatalities. So it is serious, and people do need to take care. In terms of the vaccinations, as I think you're all aware, the Borough Medical Centre, the Mulberry Centre as it's now called, is the main one, but not just for us. It's all the way from Cheddar down to and including Burnham and Highbridge. From what I'm hearing, it's operating, having had a few teething problems, I think it would be fair to say. It seems to have got its act together, and they have been asking for volunteers to help with car park management and keeping the flow going, because obviously they want to get as many people through as possible. County Council and District both are offering staff on sort of almost like secondment to help out with the vaccination. So it may mean that some services currently offered by the county and district will be a little bit slower than normal, because some of our staff are going off to help get these vaccinations through, in terms of, as I say, it's technical support of management not doing them themselves. The other thing just to mention in terms of broadband on a different subject, you'll remember that GigaClear was awarded the contract for doing broadband to the areas that had no high-speed broadband. They lost the contract about 18 months ago or so. The contracts have just been relet, and I believe I'm right in understanding that TrueSpeed have been awarded the contract in our area. Now, obviously, they've been talking about doing some work in Brent Knoll anyway, and whether this allocation of this contract will help encourage them to do that as well, I'm not sure. We're going to try and follow it up with them and see if we can encourage them to look again. They won't look at it under this new contract, because technically we already have superfast broadband in that we can get 40 or 50 meg, whereas some areas are still only getting 1 or 2. So they're targeting the slowest first, but it may help encourage them to come here. And again, on a local note, and it's coming up on the agenda later to some extent, we lost our bus services a few years ago, and we've been trying to talk to county about getting it reinstated. We've managed to get a bit of movement, that the funding has been made available to introduce a limited bus service a couple of days a week to start with, to see what sort of response there is to it. Now, the plan was that it was going to start end of last year, beginning of this. Obviously, with lockdown and people being discouraged from using public transport, there was no point in doing that. However, we needed to check that the government were happy for us to roll some of their funding, which is going towards it, forward for a year, which they've said they will. So we're aiming to get it going in the summer of 2021. And that will be basically a service running from Bridgewater to Cheddar and coming through Brent Knoll and East Brent on the way. So hopefully we'll get further details as we get nearer the time, but we should be seeing that happen. And it will be very much a question of then encouraging people to make best use of it as they can, because it will be monitored. And if it's getting a lot of use, it may be expanded. And if it doesn't get any use, it will disappear again. But the funding should be there for at least a couple of years to give it a chance to establish itself and see what we can do. So it sort of brought it to a head, because we've got on the agenda later about removal of bus signs. So please don't remove them just yet, because we might be getting a bus back.
Right.
Is that it, Bob? Are you okay? Thank you. Thanks very much. Interesting. Okay, Owen, finance and payment, please.
Very brief on that. The regular contracts as per usual. Regular payments, salary, GB Sports, JP Mayo. We've got 3 new payments. SLCC subscription for the year 2021, £144. Office expenditure for the period October to December, £151.95, which is obviously down because there's no fuel involved in that. Decision Power annual website maintenance, £486. So just those 3 new payments for this month. Are you happy to approve those? And if you need any more information, please ask.
Fellow councillors, can you signify that you're happy that we pay those 3 accounts, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Budget has been sent out, obviously, pre-circulated in December. And then that brings us on effectively to the grant applications. Now we've had, in response to our articles in BKN, etc., we've had one from Rainbows, one from Brent Knoll Preschool, which is replacing tadpoles, one from Promise Works, which you heard about last month, and one from Mendip Community Transport. So they're all the requests we've had formally for some kind of grant funding. So it's a matter for you. Obviously, Andy needs to declare here because of his involvement with Promise Works. In fact, Andy, if you don't mind, I'm going to send you into the waiting room. Is that all right? On Promise Works.
So what have Rainbows asked for, Owen?
Well, Rainbows haven't asked for a specific figure, although actually the other one has. Brent Knoll Preschool have asked for £300. Yeah.
And what do we normally give Mendip Community Transport? We normally give them a nominal amount, don't we?
Yeah, it's about £100 normally, or has been in the past. Because we normally get a request from CAB, but we haven't had that this time. So I don't know whether they're changing their policies for seeking grants, whether they don't have the manpower to send out the requests. I just don't know.
What can someone remind me, Bob? Sorry, go on.
I was only going to mention in terms of the rainbow guides, they sent with their application form, they sort of implied they were after about 250 quid because that was what they hadn't got in terms of funding.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they said they were short of funds, didn't they? Yeah. Okay.
So,
we've got 250 for Rainbows, 300 for Brent Knoll Preschool, and we've got Mendip Transport of £100. Andy, we're going to have to put you in the cell for a moment.
Yeah, hold on a minute. I'm just going to find. I'm just going to put you in the. I can find where I can't find you. You don't seem to be coming up on my list for some reason. It's a bit strange. On my list of people, it doesn't come up, Andy. And why is that? On my participants.
He's on iPad 2, it says.
iPad 2.
Ah, is that what it is? Right, sorry.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for.
He's
Right.
changed his name. iPad.
There he goes. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, that's the fourth one, really.
Okay.
We've got £950 in the budget for this year for grants.
Well, we're just saying a goodbye to 650. So, I mean, essentially, as Andy said, they need £2,000 to provide the facility for one young person to go through their course, if you like, of rehabilitation. I was going to propose 500, but clearly we haven't got that. Would anyone else like to take that on from me, please?
No
The
views.
silence is deafening. Bob?
I mean, I must admit, we obviously had a bit of a presentation about what they did last time. It's something a little bit out of our normal remit, and I wonder whether maybe if we did something like a couple of hundred as a 10% of what they need for one person, at least it's a contribution towards it. I don't think we can get anywhere near the sort of £2,000 mark, but at least it helps them maybe get some other funding from elsewhere to see they've got the support of the parish council.
How much did we have in our grants, Owen, please?
We have in the budget £950.
I would propose that both the groups that wanted 300 and 250 to even it up to 250 each and 100 for the other one.
Okay, so we give Rainbows 250, preschool 250, Mendip Community Transport £100, and are we saying that we give Promise Works 250 as
200,
well?
200, wasn't it?
Okay, 200. That's the proposal. Rainbows 250, preschool 250, Promise Works 200, Mendip Community Transport 100, making a total of £800.
And then Chair, that leaves us a little bit in the kitty if anybody else comes in between now and the end of the financial year.
Okay, that's the proposal, split like that. All those in favour?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds good. 250 Rainbows, preschool 250, Promise Works 200, Mendip 100.
100, yeah.
Can you let Andy back in, please?
Yes, I can. There we go. He's on his way.
Okay, iPad 2. There it goes.
I'm back. Hello.
iPad 2. You sound like something off Star Wars. Okay, 6A, Village Shop. Bob, do you want to take us through on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. It was really just that, as you know, we've been discussing about the retention of the village shop in the village as a whole. We'd approached the Santander, who are the mortgage holders for the building that is there at the moment. They wish to have a valuation carried out on the property. The reason being that obviously at the moment they have a charge over the entire property, which is both the domestic dwelling and the shop, and they count it as one unit. They need to have a valuation of the shop as the separate unit so that they make sure that they've got themselves covered in terms of their charge on the property. They have come back to us saying that they wanted to have someone that they had dealings with in terms of the valuation so that they were feeling it was a fair and independent valuation. And they came back with a quotation for £1,500 for that to be carried out. The slight difficulty we have is obviously ultimately Santander are the charge holder. We could get our own independent valuation done, but ultimately we're going to have to go back to them and they have to authorise it. So in effect, what is in front of us is asking for £1,500 to carry out a valuation to enable us to look into take further the purchase of the building that is currently the village shop.
Okay. Yes, Nigel.
Just some comments on this. So we're looking to sort of like commit ourselves with regards to financially to have a survey done, but we haven't had a business plan from the community shop yet, have we?
No, but okay. That's not. We're not even there yet. Okay. Because if you remember, we drew up a list of about 12 or 14 different things that we needed to address if we became landlords, but we haven't even got there. It could well be, I think, Nigel, this is the first hoop that we have to jump through. And once we can assess what the valuation of it is, then we can make a decision what we're going to do. And obviously, a business plan will be number one requirement. And by all accounts, they're having a great difficulty getting that together. So my...
Ollie, can I just say something? We've already agreed this 1,500. This is not a new resolution. This was agreed in a meeting that we had in December.
I'm sorry.
Yes, and in fact, we've given them the undertaking now to go ahead and do it.
Yes, so really what we have, sorry, Warwick, go on.
Yeah, no, I thought actually under previous discussions to do with the village shop, one of the key enablement things that we were going to do prior to any of this was to actually get an organisation to actually do a feasibility on whether we could legitimately separate the essentially an extension stroke annex to the house to do with fire and other bits and pieces, if it was viable. Because if it isn't viable, it's not worth spending the money finding the valuation of it, because if we can't actually separate it as a viable entity, then it's not really worth the undertaking in the first place. And these were the things that we discussed in length, and it was a good idea that we should actually see whether or not this actual extension, single story extension on the side of a house can actually be separated as a single entity for fire and all sorts of things, services and everything. Because if it can, and it becomes, because that could theoretically complicate any valuation moving forward, because if it's not an entity in itself, then how can they value it as a single?
Well, surely we've got to then ask the surveyor in his report to have a look at those sort of things, or we have one surveyor who's valuing the property, and then we decide, well, we are interested, but before we do anything else, we then get another survey, which is much more of a structural rather than a value survey. But Bob, come in.
Yes, certainly in terms of things like services, I know that the working group that are looking at the shop have already been looking into the connection of sewers, the connection of power that could be done, and it would be in effect from the far end of the building, the Battleborough Lane end, because that's where the services are closest to it, as is water supply. So they are at the stage where they believe they can do that. Obviously, there would have to be physical separation of bricking up and securing the fire retardancy between the domestic dwelling and the shop, but that is something they feel they can achieve. At the moment, all we're at is the valuation, so that if it comes back at a figure that we can't even touch, then we know we can't proceed. If it comes at something that we're expecting, then at that stage we've got to make that decision. And in terms of the operation of the shop, to some extent, that's separate from where we are, because we're still talking about, as we discussed previously, we're talking about being the land holder. We're not talking about whether or not it stacks up for what they're doing. If they fail and we own the building, then we can choose whether to dispose that building, rent it to somebody else, or do something else with it. So we still retain an asset, even if the business of the shop that is currently operating there wasn't in a position to operate properly.
So, Owen, correct me if I'm wrong then, all we have to do is take a vote to confirm or a resolution to approve the sum of £1,500 for a valuation report, which we've more or less already...
We have already done that.
Already did it.
We did it during an interim meeting. If you remember right, we called everybody together to find out what the outside of the main meeting, because we were on a time issue. And at that meeting, we decided that we would go ahead with those that were present. We would go ahead and authorize Santander to do the valuation, which they are due to do over the next week or two.
Bob?
I think, Chairman, technically, at that meeting, we gave a guide as to what the views were of members. Obviously, we can't take a decision outside of a public meeting. So this meeting is having to, in effect, endorse the guidance that was given at that previous meeting to say that's what we're going to do, because it is for the full council to make that decision. Okay.
Can we therefore endorse the decision that we took at the last meeting to carry out a valuation report on the shop, as we have just identified? So I think that's the important thing. Can we vote all those who are in favour of that report, please, expending on that report? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
6,
Yeah.
and yes. So anybody against, you may as well signify. John and Andrea.
I was at the time.
Sorry?
I was at the time against.
Yes, yes. No, I appreciate that, John. Thank you. Okay. That confirms that where we are with the shop then. As the speed indicator device, we had a meeting with our lawyer prior to Christmas, I think, and we wanted him to press on and issue proceedings against this SG group, and he did point out quite rightly that we have to abide by, and some of you will probably be aware of this, the rules of civil procedure. And the rules of civil procedure are that both parties should make every effort to seek some form of assessment and agreement before they march off to county court, before for want of a better word, a judge. And so what I've done, I've written to SG prior to Christmas and given them a timescale and a suggestion of what should be done in order to confirm whether their equipment is suitable or not. And I've said if it fails on any of the particular criteria, then that is the end of the matter. Needless to say, I've heard, or we have heard nothing. So I will again follow him up, pointing out that he does have an obligation under the rules of civil procedure to enter into dialogue with us. So the other thing I'll have to do is extend the time, because I gave him to the 30th of January. I'll have to extend it because of the lockdown and all those sort of scenarios. So I'm afraid it's tortuous, but we cannot do anything else but seek to resolve it in a procedural way. I don't know if anybody's got any criticisms or comments on where we are.
I think we've been very, very patient over the years with this firm, and they need to be pushed. I think you're right to write like you did to them.
Okay. Anybody else, or shall we move on? I know it's very satisfactory, but yeah, I can only apologise. Additional job bin provision. Bob, I think you were going to speak to the people about citing it.
Yes, the last feedback we had from Sedgemoor, who were the ones who were going to be installing it, was that they wanted to double check on site to actually physically see it. So they're due to be coming out to meet. Obviously, the lockdown now is again causing a delay on that. So as soon as we've met on site, they should be able to install it. And the site we were talking about was the one we talked at the last meeting, which is in effect opposite the school on the highway verge, which highways have said, as long as it's not in their visibility display, they're happy with it. But we just need to make sure that both Sedgemoor and highways both exactly know where they're putting it, so we don't have any problems.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting, but I've received several comments about the increase in dog mess that is on our pavements, and it's becoming a problem once again, which we should maybe have to address. Brian?
I don't think the site that has been chosen is particularly good. I think it could be quite dangerous. And I would still go for the suggestion I made in the first place, that it be put on the outside wall of the gents' toilet. There's more space there, and I think it'd be safer.
Very smelly.
I can't comment on that, because essentially it was meant to cover the people exiting from the field, and it was meant to be. We used to have one at the school. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Now what we're doing is simply putting it opposite the school, i.e., more or less where one used to be.
I still think it's dangerous there.
Bob, what's your feelings on that?
I can only say, I mean, in effect, highways are saying they're happy as long as it's a metre off the carriageway, so people have got space. The difficulty is if we put it down near the village green, we already have a bin by the toilet block anyway, which people can use if they want to, and you're within a stone's throw of the dog bin that's at the top of Body's Lane. So we'd end up with everything down that one area and nothing up the other end heading towards the sort of shop area.
I think probably, Brian, what we should do is cite it, get it cited and see how regularly it's used. And we can always ask the Sedgemoor that come and empty it for a report on its usage. And then if it doesn't get used, then we've got to consider reciting it somewhere else. But at least we've got something and we've done something about it. We can't keep deferring these decisions. We've got to make a decision and get on with it, to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
So can we press on with that one, Bob, please? We don't need any more decisions on that, do we, Owen?
No. We've got all the decisions we need at the moment.
Okay. Weight restrictions on Burton Row. Owen, can you give us any information?
I had a comment after our last meeting when we discussed it and we agreed that we would request this weight restriction, and we said it had to be conditional on Brent Street coming into the same arena as that. And that's what I minuted. And in fact, the person who raised the issue, first of all, didn't think the minutes had enough detail on them. But as I pointed out to him, the minutes were not intended to be a verbatim, 2-page discussion on weight restrictions. We simply agreed that we would move it on and start the process, which is what we've done. And he's happy with that now, actually. I've now explained that to him, and he seems quite happy with that. We've done
okay.
So it's in process. I don't think anything's going to happen very quickly, frankly. But at least we started the process, and we can start getting some feedback, hopefully, from the county at some stage.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. 20-mile-an-hour limit near the village school. I don't know who's following this one up.
We're just waiting for implementation. It's going to happen. We're just not sure when.
Okay.
It'll be sometime between the back end of 21 and early 22, I think.
Good Lord.
Bob?
Yeah, what Owen said is quite right. The one thing I wanted to just draw members' attention to was I had dropped through my door the other day a petition which is still being circulated around the village calling for a 20-mile-an-hour limit around the school. I wonder whether we could again just publicise the fact that this is already in hand. It's something that is being dealt with, and that people don't need to keep signing a petition asking for it, because it's coming. But
I'll put something in the BKN for February.
I think that's a valid point, and that and the weight restriction. Is there a way that we just take a column or a space in the circular, the document that goes around to everybody, and just in there, just keep continually updating that so that councillors don't get harassed because it's already in the document going around, and all we do is then just keep that updated.
Yeah, we can.
Because the problem with putting it in once is how many people will miss it.
Yes, yeah, it needs to be there regularly. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Andy. Battleborough Grange extension consultation. This is really planning. Andrew, have you got any news on this, or Owen?
No, I only put it on there because we had the consultation which I circulated pre-Christmas, and I just thought it was something that people might want to start thinking about. It wasn't really meant to be a specific discussion document as such for a decision. It was just simply so that you're aware that a big application is coming in to us at some stage.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything to add to that, Bob. Is it just ongoing, really?
It's not been allocated a number, so the official
There's no application at the moment.
No, no. And again, you know, it could be just hearsay. It could be something that they're just putting the feelers out about. But until such times as an application is actually lodged with the council, I think we just leave it where it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next point, telephone kiosk managed future use.
Well, Kim is looking after the telephone box at the moment. There have been 1 or 2 comments made that it's looking a bit dilapidated inside and not looking very inspiring to somebody who wants to find out things about the village. I'm not sure really what we can do with it. Actually, I think we've got the basis of it there. Any ideas, really?
Brian?
Well, where it is at the moment, I think it's just lost. It's just not interesting at all. And it's a 20th century icon, as I've mentioned before. And I would like to see it moved to the village green, because the red of it against the green background are both complementary colours. And I think it would be a good aesthetic thing for us to do. It may cost a fair bit, but I would be quite happy to see it there. And it would be locked so nobody could use it, so it wouldn't deteriorate inside. We just have to keep up the maintenance of the outside.
Andrew?
I might get drummed out of the village for this, so I'll put it forward and then run. Why don't we sell it?
Warwick?
I'll have it. I'll have it. I said I'll pay a quid for it, as what the council paid for it originally.
I'll pay 2 quid.
Sadly, they do raise quite a lot of money, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
I think probably what would pay us to do is wait and see what happens with the shop, if it goes ahead, and then take a firmer decision on it. That's my Bob.
Say there are some legal restrictions on the use of that box.
Exactly, that was what I was
When
going to say.
BT sold it to us, there were some covenants on it on what you could do with it and what you couldn't do with it. And I don't, without refreshing myself, I can't remember what those covenants were. But they need to be looked at before we did anything with it at all.
Well, it would go as a listed monument in the back in the curtilage of our listed building, so it would be listed then.
Yeah.
And Warwick will be living in it.
But its position at the moment is just lost, really. I think.
Bob
was also going to say, I think, Owen, weren't you doing a bit of homework in terms of other uses that might be coming forward for that anyway?
Yeah.
That we looked at in the new year.
I mean, there are some really good uses of telephone boxes around. We just need to find the right one for us.
Not a dog bin.
I was thinking brilliant uses of them around in different places, and they can be used very effectively, but they do need very good management. I think this is the issue. They do need looking after.
I still think it needs repositioning. It's just lost there where it is.
are we able to reposition it, Owen?
Well, no, that was one of my concerns. The covenant, there's a whole raft of covenants, and I'd need to look at those covenants to determine what we can and what we can't do with it.
Okay, can we therefore
try and do that?
Yeah.
I don't.
Please. Yeah, sorry, Cynthia.
I said I don't think it should be removed. Not at the moment, until we know.
Before it's stolen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well,
Let's do what we can and can't do, and then we can debate with proper facts before us, rather than
well, it could be interesting.
yeah, blue sky thinking. Okay, all right.
Onwards and upwards.
Yeah. Okay. H. I received a letter from Tony Hill that I think has been distributed to you all. He does make some very valid points, and he's unfortunately I can't. He sent a lot of photographs through of the things that he is not, or asking us whether we can make our village look a bit tidier, and straighten up our signs, make them a bit cleaner, get rid of signs where he feels there's a duplication. He's also talking about the road that we've identified, Hill Lane, which has a large crack down the centre. He's also outlining the water that runs across the road. And last week, when it was really icy, that had iced over and it was really hazardous, black ice. Unfortunately, he says, well, it's a spring that's coming out of the ground, but I don't think it is, because if you walk up the lane in the grounds of Borcops Hall, there is an old septic tank where water drains into it. It's very old, and also there is a small pond, and so I think this is water that is seeping down the bank and then hitting the road. And unfortunately, it's not going into the drain, it is flowing across the road, which is probably causing the problem. But I think we need to have a closer look at it. But coming back to our earlier suggestion on an odd job man, I do believe that a lot of these things can be carried out by an odd job man, cleaning our signs and making it look a bit tidier. And that probably would highways have to be involved in some of these things, Owen?
I think they would. I think they would. I think it depends what we're asking somebody to do. On some of these things, a Chapter 8 training would be required.
Yeah.
Or the equivalent. Obviously, a lot of them, that doesn't apply. But so we need to make sure that whoever we asked is actually trained correctly according to the county standard. But that doesn't preclude us from doing it. It just means we've just got to be a bit mindful of what jobs we're asking them to do.
Warwick.
Yeah, I'd have thought under all this COVID lockdown in the schools and everything, it'd be a good thing for the kids to do, to clean the signs and everything like that, wouldn't it?
It's like fire
Instead of playing on the games consoles and doing that. Yeah.
Joe's gone in the army.
So can we source between us, Owen? Can we source a guy that we could probably approach?
We need to find somebody.
These jobs, or looking at them a bit more careful.
Definitely.
Bob.
Sorry about that. Was just going to comment on a couple of them. The item 3 on the list, which I think is the area opposite Westcroft Farm, where he was saying it's the redundant bus stop, the leaning 30-mile-an-hour sign. It might be worth flagging that up to the drainage board, because they're about to be doing all the work along that Reen, and it's part of the problem is the bank of the Reen is collapsing, so it's taking everything else with it, including the fence, before too long. So that might be worth having a word with them. The number 6 on the list, which I think was the photo you showed us of the sign at the bottom of Hill Lane.
Yeah.
The reason it's halfway up the post is because there used to be another sign above it, which has disappeared. It used to point in one direction, Knoll via church and Knoll via farm. Yeah, so we might be able to ask Highways if they could replace the Knoll via the church to match the other one, which would help on that one. And as you said about the road with the crack, I think we've got a flag and the water on the surface. Again, we need to press Liam Gill on that one, because that is going to be Highways and sorting out where the water's flowing down there.
Okay. So can we... Owen, I'll go through these and identify which ones we've got to go to Highways for, and which ones that we can possibly seek a guide to do for us.
So Highways, and then obviously drainage board on one of them.
Yeah. I think we should, Tony's made a big effort to do it, and the photographs are really quite good.
Very good.
And I mean, here's the post that Bob has just talked about, opposite the cider farm, can you see the post that's leaning into the Reen, for instance?
Yeah.
Because the bankers collapsed, and they are really valid. He also wants us to possibly remove bus stop signs, but I think given what Bob has said to us, we should leave those for the time being. Very, very much so. So yeah, you know, there's some useful stuff there that we can do. There's the one for the knoll, and you can see it's halfway down, but you know, it's not very good. And he's also identified, I don't know if it comes out, but there are two signs here, which one is on an angle and the one's straight, but they both say the same things within a matter of yards of each other. And he says, is this necessary to have two signs? But also, if we've got two signs, should we not have that one properly positioned in an erect manner, which shows that we take pride in the village? So there are some useful things to do.
I think he should be complimented on his efforts, really.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Okay, Glebland.
You're disappearing, Colin, are you on this one?
Yeah, I'll disappear.
So I'll put you in the waiting room then, okay. And Brian is our new chairman.
Yeah, right. Sit up and fold your arms.
He volunteered very willingly for it.
Yeah. We have a press gang, you mean? We come to item 6, number I. Is it 1 or I? Can't see.
I, it's I.
Aye. Land for sale by tender, Church Lane. And we've got to consider any matters relating to the recent sale by the tender of the glebe field in Church Lane. The land is being offered, and it's categorised, as you probably know, as pasture land. We have to consider our position on this land. What are our ideas? We can talk around, and all this is very confidential, and no values or amounts can be mentioned at all. So over to you.
I'll just give you some background. I've actually had some discussions over the last couple of days with the diocese, because I was concerned, obviously, about the time frame that we were being given, a very tight time frame, bearing in mind that whatever decision we take on purchase, we would almost certainly need to get our ducks in a row in terms of financing. I do believe that the diocese are fairly warm to us in terms of any potential use for community benefit. I've got the impression from them that they are prepared to look very carefully at what our uses might be, and that could be a swaying factor when it comes to deciding on the best use of the land. So, you know, that's the basis of my chats with the diocese. And I mean, you know, we've just got to decide, I guess, as a council, whether it's something we want to pursue.
One of my suggestions was to suggest that it would be a good place for us to plant some trees to make a small wood copse, and put some bluebells, plant bluebells and make a bluebell wood there. I think it would be a great thing to do, and it would be a great legacy for us to leave to the village, and it'd increase bees and pollinators and or a wildflower meadow. And it would take a few years to establish, but I think that would be quite a good, viable idea to the rest of you.
Bob wants to make a point, I think.
Pardon?
Bob.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Bob. I can't. Sorry,
That's all right. Thanks, Brian.
I've got my glasses on. I can't see you.
That's okay. Was I guess to some extent it's almost taking it back a step. Fundamentally, I guess as a council, we've got to decide whether we're interested in bidding for this land. It's obviously become, we've over the years, for a number of years, there's been discussion about the parish council looking to acquire the glebe, simply because it obviously adjoins the village green. I know going back a lot of years ago, there was discussion about the Willows before that became the housing development as to whether that could have been an extension. It didn't happen. It turned into housing. It's been talked about for a number of possible uses that could be there that would benefit the community. But to some extent, I guess the position we're in at the moment is it's a once in a generation opportunity that might not come again, because if it is sold into private ownership, it may never come up for public ownership again. So ultimately, I guess we need to make the decision as a council whether we wish to acquire the glebe, and then under another item on the agenda, we'd have to discuss how and when and the sort of details of it. But in principle, I guess we need to decide as to whether it's something we feel would be a benefit to the village and whether we should be putting our oar in.
Anybody else like to add their part to it? Yes.
Andy.
Okay.
Not knowing again too much, so forgive my ignorance on it. It's a parcel of land that backs onto the field, onto the playground. It's in quite a tight place, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 properties that are probably going to be interested in what happens to it for various reasons. Is it, and I'm thinking about spending public money, because I looked at the value, these things tend to go anything up to double what they're estimated to go for. If we are going to buy it, would it not be worth us firstly identifying exactly what we want to do with it? And I think most of it is about leave it fairly natural from what we're saying in one way or another, Bluebell Woods, whatever, but leave it natural and leave it for the village. So would it, that protects the people that are surrounding that piece of land? Why don't we form a coalition and use their funds to support us rather than us having to use public funds, or as Owen I think has indicated, we'd have to go and get a loan to buy it. So is there any way that we can sort of form a coalition to save that land, put restrictions on it, and we become the majority owner, so that the council always has to be involved in any decisions that happen to the land? It is then safe, and we haven't had to pay full price, and those people around it benefit financially because their properties aren't going to be imposed upon. So I'm pretty sure they'd all put something towards it.
Andrea?
Just an idea.
Owen, I know you said that there were people that were interested in the purchase of this land. Was any of those the direct neighbours?
I don't know, because obviously when I asked the question to Greenslade Taylor and the diocese, all I was told was there are at least 2 or 3 interested parties at that stage. Obviously, I wouldn't disclose who those parties were.
And knowing wouldn't make any difference who they were. It's just that I'm liking what Andy's saying, is that, you know, that and if it's a village project and that it's owned by several people, then just all the emphasis on us. And when we had the meeting before, the informal meeting, you know, it's about loaning money and paying that back, and we're going to leave a legacy for the next generation of parish councils, but we're also leaving a debt. And I have to agree with Andy, is that, you know, you're giving something with one hand, but you're taking it away with another. And I do wonder whether we ought to explore different avenues. And I would like to see that would be a real possibility.
You would else like to say something?
One of the difficulties you have, of course, is you've got a time constraint. And this is the biggest difficulty, because you've only got effectively till the 26th of January to finalise any tender. So time is not on our side, actually, in terms of that. And the diocese are not prepared to change the date for the tender, which is a pity, because I was hoping they would, but they won't. So we're obliged
put together a proposal about what our vision is, and then at the 12th hour that we actually put forward an amount of money, so that we tell them up front what we would like to do with it, and then actually attach what we're prepared to pay for it. But then that's making the decision that we are going to accept that we will foot that bill.
Bob?
I think the other thing, in terms of our vision, two things. One, I think it's difficult to say now exactly what it would necessarily be used for. There are a number of different suggestions that have been made over the time. If it is owned by the parish council, what happens to it will be decided by our successors as well.
Yeah.
So we can't necessarily bind their hands. And I think if we are looking at going into some sort of coalition with other people, how do you split the ownership? What happens? Is it a percentage thing? I mean, does someone have part of it and someone have something else? It gets, I think at that stage, it could get quite complicated. But ultimately, as I say, members need to make up their mind what we as a council need to do.
Warwick?
Yeah, I think where Bob's going is if you think about it, the parcel of land, if you had 6 people, it's how you would split that and who's got entitlement over it through land registry. Is it part of a house sale or part of, each individual house, so that the next incumbent buying it could then decide to put a fence around their proportion of it and then use it as their back garden, because technically they've got ownership. So it all gets quite muddy and murky and very difficult, and the amount of litigation to split it all up with all the caveats and covenants in it is going to, I think, be more problematic and would slow any process of us acquiring it.
Brian, there's
Okay, yeah, go on.
another issue there is that
Yeah.
the loan, any loan that we went for, would possibly not be given to us if it was a shared deed. In other words, reading some of the small print of the Public Works Loans Board, there would be restrictions on how you can share local authority land with other landowners. There are restrictions because obviously the Public Works Loans Board are offering loans at very, very attractive rates, and therefore they put quite a lot of restrictions on how you buy the land, whether you buy it solely, because of course at the end of the day they have a charge on the land.
Yeah.
So therefore, because they've got a charge on it, it's in their interest to know who the other parties are.
Yeah.
And if they're not happy with those other parties, for whatever reason, they won't give you the loan. So that's another thing you've got to consider, obviously.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, no, I think what Warwick and Owen is saying and Bob is saying is absolutely right. But I think the way we field this to neighbours is you've got a choice. You either buy it yourself and protect it yourself, in which case we as a council lose it because somebody puts a 6-foot fence around it and we've lost it anyway. You say to them, you can have nothing to do with it and hope that a developer doesn't buy it and play the long game, which I think is most of our concerns. And in the current climate, a developer will buy it and the long game will be that it will be built on, because you can't stop buildings going up, as we know already in the village, for a very long time. And so what we could do is say, right, for a sum, we'll put a covenant against the land, which doesn't give them deed or titleship or confuse anything. It's a straightforward document that says the council promises not to sell it without blah, 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 or not to sell it on for development. And they get what they want, which is nobody building on the land next to them. and the council gets what it wants, which is 100% ownership, with restrictions of very little that because we don't want to build on it anyway. So we very quickly, a solicitor could draw that up for it. I know, I'm speaking from experience. When I bought this house, I've got covenants coming out my bloody ears on it, which I need to get changed. So very quickly, we can get a solicitor to write a covenant. It doesn't affect our ability to take the loan and have ownership, because we're not, when we state our intention will never be to sell it for profit. So we get what we want, but we can get it at a lower price. More importantly, we can probably put a higher bid in because we're being funded and guarantee that we win the bidding. And I think one of the concerns that Owen expressed was outside influences, developers with slightly less scruples than us, and more money, and less accountability going for that piece of land.
Warwick?
Well, the only fly in the ointment I see there, Andy, is potentially if we borrowed the money, then whoever we borrowed the money from would expect a charge on it, and those covenants could complicate any sale of it to recoup any losses. So they might not want the covenant that they couldn't sell it at a profit, or they couldn't sell it to a developer or anything like that. So we'd have to be could almost, because they if we default for whatever reason, then they need to sell that land to recoup those losses.
Absolutely, Warwick. And
restrict who's going to buy it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. But there's two things when they do loans that they'll be looking at. Is one is the ability of the council to pay back, which is almost guaranteed, because even if we go bankrupt, we're actually owned by Sedgemoor and whatever format that takes. So they're going to get the guarantee because it's effectively a government loan. So they'll be safe in that knowledge. And the fact that we can quickly brief them what our intention is. So we wouldn't be breaching what we're telling them, because we would have said right at the start, we're going to turn it into a meadow or for use of the public. But what we're not doing is turning it into a housing estate. And we will have to state that up front for usage anyway. So the only difference is we're saying we're doing it and we've guaranteed our neighbours. So we're definitely not doing it. Or if we do, we've got a penalty. So I think you're absolutely right. But the likelihood of it being turned away is less. And we could, if we've got a decent solicitor quick on his toes, he can amend wording to get it. And I'm not well wedded to this, guys. I just thought, I think that we all seem to want it. It seems a good idea to me. Whether there's a house up there or not doesn't really affect me particularly. It is a nice piece of land. It's got a beautiful tree on it. It seems to me that as a council, we want it, but we don't want to pay the money as much as we want to. Is all I was thinking.
I wonder what Cynthia got any views, obviously, on it.
Well, I think it's an extremely good idea. I think we should go for it and make it part of this village. And there are many things which we could do with it, which would be nice for the village. And I think that Brian made a very good suggestion. It could be obviously part of the village green, but it could be a place where people would like to go and sit and be, in a nice kind of tranquil situation. It's a very nice piece of land, actually. Got a beautiful tree there. And I don't think it needs messing up. You could keep it into something which really did go with the rest of the surroundings.
Well, we could add a skate park so the kids have got something to do, haven't they?
Yeah, you do that.
What about
I don't know.
The purpose of this meeting really is to decide, are we really going to go for a tender?
That's the first thing. This particular item on the agenda, that's what this item is.
I think we should do.
So can I ask for a vote on it? All those in favour?
Yes.
Yes.
And myself, you're unanimous? Right, thank you.
I'll bring Colin back now because we've got a gap between this and the other session.
My internet is saying I'm unstable, so I may be cut off. So you'll have somebody else to take over later.
Okay. All right.
Did that on purpose.
Right. Hello, Colin.
Hi.
Yeah, we were on section 7 now, which is really the correspondence, which is a very short resume of the main items from the correspondence by email. And I think we've more or less covered them actually. We've got resident regarding the weight restriction, which I've explained that we've had that correspondence. With local residents from planning matters, which we've seen. I updated the council on the Bakersfield issue, which has been pre-circulated. Sent that out again before Christmas. And then there's obviously the email about lack of post office operation near Brent Corner.
Okay. So we can go to matters of report then now.
Well,
So
no, hold on a minute. Bob wants to say something there.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Yes,
all right.
Rob?
Thanks, Colin. It was only just to mention in terms of the Bakersfield, just an update in you remember we talked about the shared ownership properties. My understanding is now that both shared ownership properties have been allocated. They have gone through the allocation process. I'm led to believe there was quite a lot of interest, a lot from outside the village and a fair bit from inside the village as well. And they have been allocated to, I think, one person who actually has a employment within the village and another person who has a relative within the village. So they do meet the criteria. The one thing they did say was that there were quite a lot of people who lived in the village who were interested, but didn't have the financial ability to raise the money that they needed to buy the proportion, even though it was a smaller proportion. So there was some financial constraints. So it may well be that some of those might come back for the rental properties when they become available, but the two shared ownership have been allocated as per the allocations policy.
Okay.
That's good news. Yeah, yeah. It's nice to see that people in the village are benefiting from, well, both 2 Brent Street and Station Road. So that's great. Can I go on now to item 8, matters of report for the next meeting? John, have you got any particular items you want to bring forward?
Thank you.
John?
No, thank you.
No, sorry. Nigel?
Thanks.
Andrew? Andy? No. Bob?
No, thanks.
Brian?
Yeah, just to remind you, there's a sack of daffodil bulbs in my carport. You can help yourself to put them around the village.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Warwick?
No, nothing from me.
Andrea?
And nothing from me, thank you.
Okay. Cynthia?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Malcolm?
No, nothing.
Okay, that's great. Right. Owen, I don't know how long your next item is going to take, but would it be best that I bow out now and leave you plenty of time?
Yeah, I put it on there for that reason, Colin, so that you weren't unnecessarily hanging around.
So
that's why it's the last item.
yeah, so I'll leave you now to pass this resolution and take your discussions. Okay.
Thanks, Colin.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you, Colin.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So the resolution is to temporarily exclude members of the press and public and to suspend the recording of the meeting on account of the confidential nature of the remaining business to be transacted, pursuant to Standing Orders 34 and 64. Further, all members to abide by the confidentiality of this discussion until the February public meeting of the Parish Council. That's the resolution. Can I have those who support that, please?
Happy to propose.
Okay, thank you. So I'm now going to suspend the recording.